All right, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Happy Friday to students. Congrats on finishing all your classes for this semester. And we really hope that this is a nice way for you to kick off your weekend. So just as a little introduction, the talks that you are going to hear today are done by the students in the English 12 capstone class. So this is a class that students have an opportunity to take in their final year of high school, if they have taken a lot of other English classes already, basically. And there are three big things that we do in this class in the semester. It's just a one-semester course. So the first thing we do is, we actually do four things. We pick a topic that we're interested in. So you can see from the list, and you'll hear in the presentations today, that the topics are quite diverse, and they really represent the personal interests of the people who are talking about them. So the first job is to pick a topic. The second job is to write a very lengthy research paper with many peer-reviewed sources and lots of quotes, and it's quite an intensive process. They end up being quite long. So kids have to really show that they know a lot about their topic. Once they've done the paper, they get to create a project, and the project has to be something that is inspired by what they learned in their research. So you're actually going to hear about each of the projects that we did this semester in the talks. Our project time was a little bit tricky this semester because halfway through the time allotted for our project, we went online. So some of the projects had to change because we weren't in person doing school together anymore, so you'll hear about that. And then once the projects are done, we spend the last weeks of the semester preparing these talks. And because we were online, we didn't really know what that was going to look like this year until Monday. So since Monday, we have been continuing to prepare specifically for giving our talks in this setting. And we're just really grateful that we're able to actually have an audience of our friends and parents and dorm parents who can be here to listen to us. So I am super proud of the four students who are going to be speaking today. They have shown a lot of perseverance and flexibility, and they know a lot about these topics, and I'm excited for you to hear what we have been learning all semester. So our first speaker is going to be Mandy Liao. I'm not going to talk in between them, so they'll just go in this order, and I hope that you enjoy. Thanks for being here.
Back in the old days, when I was maybe 5 years old, I loved visiting my grandma's house because my uncle, who was a really nice guy, would always bring my cousins and I to the 7-Eleven store down the street. It was a really large 7-Eleven, filled with books, toys, clothes, beauty products, and snacks. And of course, my cousins and I would always run to the shelves filled with candy and chocolate. However, my mom didn't really like it when we went there to buy sweet things. Why? We might get cavities. That used to be the main reason why most people are against sugar. But now the innocent old days are behind us. And by the time I was 12, the reasons we couldn't go to 7-Eleven increased exponentially. You'll stop growing taller, you'll grow pimples, you'll be old and fat and sick, you'll not be able to sleep well, and you'll lose brain cells and become dumb. My mom could list so many more reasons. And so I was really confused because the side effects of eating sugar went from having to suffer through a dentist appointment to basically destroying everything in our bodies. What happened? Turns out, many years ago, the rate of obesity and diabetes spiked in the United States, and so people wanted to find out what happened. Later, they discovered that during this period, sugar industries like Coca-Cola would bribe scientists to publish studies in highly regarded journals in order to highlight fat as the cause of all these problems. And so, for a long time, fat was targeted as the villain, and sugar was ignored for decades. It wasn't until recently that these actions were uncovered, which is why now there is huge debate surrounding sugar. And so as sugar slowly became the villain, my trips to 7-Eleven decreased a lot as well. And I have to admit, even though I'm here to warn you against sugar, I love sugar as well. And I was a little salty when I couldn't go with my cousins to 7-Eleven. So, as a person who loves sugar and food and everything related to the complicated topic of healthy eating, I decided to dive deeper into this controversial issue. Why is sugar bad? Is it even bad at all? Should we avoid it? First of all, to answer these questions, let's go over what sugar is. Sugar is basically a type of carbohydrate, and carbohydrates store short-term energy in our bodies. So no matter the type of sugar we eat, whether it's fructose in fruits, lactose in dairy products, or sucrose, which is table sugar, it all eventually breaks down as glucose, which is blood sugar for our bodies to use. So hey, sugar isn't that bad, right? It stores energy, which is good. Well, you see, one of the reasons why sugar is considered as bad is because of how easy it is to overconsume it. Sugar itself in small amounts is cool, but in large amounts, not so much. And yet, in modern society, our eating habits have been shaped around this dependence on sugar, so that it's really hard not to overconsume it. And as a result, most of us eat way more than we are supposed to. Let's look at the numbers. The daily recommended sugar intake amount set by the American Heart Association said that women should have less than 6 teaspoons of sugar each day, and men should have less than 9 teaspoons. These convert to about 100 to 150 calories. But look at this picture. Many parts of the world consume a daily average of more than 400 calories. So is it really that easy to overeat sugar? Let's look at an example. This is Bill. And Bill adds 2 teaspoons of sugar into his daily coffee, and he has some yogurt and sweet granola bar for breakfast. For lunch, he has some salad with dressings, which contains sugar. And let's say for dinner, he also has some pasta and tomato sauce, which also contains a lot of sugar. Note that Bill didn't even binge on anything like donuts or ice cream. His lifestyle would be considered as healthy in modern-day standards. But even if you were like Bill, you may be way past the daily recommended amount before dinner. So, as you can see, if you eat sugary foods in addition to your daily meals, the sugar we eat every day will be off the charts. Let's look at another image. A can of soda contains 10 teaspoons of sugar, and orange juice 5.5, sports drinks 5, and a specialty coffee 7 teaspoons. So it is so easy to go past our daily recommended amount by just drinking something as common as a can of soda. Even those so-called sugar-free or diet options don't really help as well, because they just replace sugar with things like high fructose corn syrup, which is similar, if not worse, to actual sugar. But most people think that this is fine because there is no hard evidence that suggests that sugar causes diabetes or obesity explicitly. And yeah, I do agree that the evidence is not hard. But the thing is, when you overeat sugar, it becomes a huge risk factor for many diseases. More and more scientific evidence is strengthening the connection between overconsumption of sugar and many health issues, which includes diabetes, obesity, metabolic syndrome, cancer, and even cognitive decline. Not only that, sugar also has the potential for abuse. When we eat sugar, there is this sense of pleasure that acts on your brain, which encourages more intakes, similar to things like tobacco. Study shows that eating sugar will dim the activity of the decision-making part of the brain and stimulate the reward center part of the brain so that you're encouraged to eat more. And also, this cycle shows the addictive properties of sugar. In step 1, if you eat a lot of sugar in a short amount of time, your blood sugar spikes and fluctuates, which is step 2. And to respond to this, our bodies secrete a lot of insulin to drop that blood sugar level and store the excess energy, which is step 3. And this drop in blood sugar level leads to step 4, in which we become really hungry very soon, and we start craving more sugar, which leads us back to step 1. This cycle continues on and leads to lots of health problems. In addition to all these, the negative impact on society that sugar makes is also a huge concern. It was reported that the United States spent $65 billion in lost productivity and $150 billion on healthcare resources every year for diseases related to metabolic syndrome. And sugar is a huge part of these. So both on the individual level and on the greater scale, sugar cannot be ignored. Now, these 4 criteria I just mentioned above, the pervasiveness, the toxicity, the potential for abuse, and the impact on society, are actually the same criteria that justifies restrictions around alcohol. This was published in a book called Alcohol, No Ordinary Commodity by Thomas Babor. And as you can see, there is actually good reason to say that sugar justifies to having the same attention that alcohol gets in terms of the limitations and the awareness. So yeah, that was a scary bunch of information. But we are far from helpless to keeping ourselves healthy. Of course, governmental restrictions would really help, but our personal health choices would really help as well. One thing we could all start doing is to start satisfying our sugar cravings with fruits. Yes, sugar in fruits is still sugar, but it's better because the fiber in fruits absorb the sugar in a slow and controlled way so that our blood sugar wouldn't spike that much and we wouldn't get hungry sooner and we wouldn't eat that much. So eating fruits is basically the healthiest way to eat sugar because we are controlled as to how much we eat. But if you insist on having some desserts, exercising is also a great solution as well. Although it might require more effort, like a 2-mile run to compensate for a cup of bubble tea. Not a lot of people have the time and energy to do this. But of course, one other thing we could do is to just cut down our sugar intake levels. And yes, I know this is easier said than done. I too struggle a lot with sugar. Whenever I'm feeling tired or stressed or angry, I feel like it somehow justifies me to eat a lot of sugar. Because of how sugar makes me feel better when I eat it, I've sort of subconsciously started relying on sugar to fix my mood. And I know this sounds really wrong, sort of like a drug addiction, but that's basically what it boils down to. So I created this podcast for my project to help those who struggle with sugar the same way as I do. It's called the Toxic Delight because to me, that's exactly what sugar is. Basically, I know some people around me who have gone on no sugar diets successfully, and I just wanted to hear from their perspectives and spread their ideas to those around us. So I interviewed 4 students and 1 staff, Meredith, Zoe, Kulis, Abel, and Mr. Guerrero, and I also added in my own experience. There are some tips, advice, motivation, and things like that in the podcast that I got from the interviews. So I would encourage you guys to check it out if you're interested or if you need some advice to start eating healthier. There are 5 episodes in total and each about 5 to 10 minutes long. And it's available on Spotify. So allow me to summarize 2 key takeaways I got from these interviews: discipline and moderation. In our journeys to start eating healthier, discipline is key. And one way to do this is to focus on the reason of why we want to eat healthier. Do you want clearer skin? Do you want more energy, productivity? Or do you just want to be healthier in general? Knowing these and keeping these goals in mind will help us look past our temptations and focus on the end results. Also, another tip that will help with discipline is to seek motivation from those around us. Whether it's a friend, a family member, or a random guy on YouTube, having someone to keep you accountable and motivated will really help as well. The third tip I have is to just remove any possible temptation that will cause you to fail. Like, for example, when someone offers you something sweet, try to say no immediately, because if you give yourself time to think about it, it's more likely that your temptation will get the better of you. Also, this might sound obvious, but if you're trying to go on a no-sugar diet or trying to reduce your sugar intake, Try to not buy anything sweet while you're grocery shopping. But this is the exact kind of mistake that I would make. So finally, what I've personally found really helpful is to create other habits or protocols of relief that will direct you away from sugar. Like for example, I love sugar because it helps me feel less stressed, right? But recently, I've started stretching more often and doing some yoga, and I found that it makes me feel better and more energized. So that would basically replace sugar's function in my life. So I encourage you to figure out what sugar's function is in your life and replace it with something healthier. Now, even though everything I just said is really important to start eating healthier, it is also important to note the importance of moderation. It might not be a great idea to totally cut sugar from your life once and for all, because our goal right now is to decrease our sugar intake levels so that it falls beneath the recommended amount, not anything extreme. By going too extreme, we risk falling back into binging, and we don't want that. So slow and steady with the right amount of discipline is always the way to go. Eventually, I realized that going to 7-Eleven with my uncle isn't that much a desirable thing anymore. Because after diving into this topic, doing some interviews, and even trying a no sugar week myself for the podcast, I realized that it's more than possible to detach from sugar's sweet, sweet temptation. But of course, it's still hard. But any effort would make a difference, as long as you care. The important thing now is to start acknowledging the warnings and stop eating too much sugar. No matter where you are in this journey, it's never too late to start. Let's start being actively aware of why, when, where, and how we eat too much sugar. Let's help each other out, spread awareness, and remind our friends and families. And who knows, maybe this eating habit we've established for thousands of years can take a sharp turn, and we can head towards a healthier world. Thank you.
I want to start off today with a simple magic trick. Let's say we have these 5 numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And we all start at the number 1. I want all you guys to follow the steps as I say it. First, make 4 moves. You can either go to the left or to the right, but you can't jump between numbers. Like go from 1 to 3, and you also can't go from 1 to 5 and 5 to 1. Also, if you're at the edge, like at number 5, you bounce back. So you go 4, 5, and you bounce back and come back to 4. Now, let's make 3 more moves. I think I am deciding how many moves to make, and you might think that this is part of the trick. So, you can decide however many moves that you want to make. But be realistic. Don't make like 100 moves. Is everyone at a number? Now, let's make that same amount of move one more time. You can either go to the left, to the right, it's up to you. Now, if you're a guy, I want you to make 2 moves to the right. If you're a girl, I want you to stay at the number that you're at. And lastly, I want every single one of you to make 2 moves to the right. What number did you get? Let me guess. 4. How did I know this? Was it a guess? No. Did I somehow guide every single one of you to the same number? Yes. This is a simple magic trick, yet it is a special magic trick because it is based off of math. I used some mathematical concept to lead all of you guys to the same number. This is one example of how math plays a role in our life, yet this is just a start. Math is all around us in our world today. I love math. I love talking about math. It excites me. I feel like as if a blanket of happiness has been thrown over me when I talk about math. That is why when I found out how much math exists in our surroundings, I wanted to tell others about it. Yet, I wanted to be special and different. I wanted to talk about a concept that isn't really talked about: irrational numbers. Irrational numbers is a type of number that cannot be written as a fraction of two integers, or also known as it has infinite number of digits. To make everything clear, numbers like 1, 10 over 3, 1,000, 2.543 are called rational numbers. They can be written as a fraction, and they have a fixed number of digits. On the other hand, numbers like root 2, pi, 2.73915, and it keeps on going on, are irrational numbers. Some examples of irrational numbers can be this. How does this make you feel? How does this make you think? Do you think you have seen them before? Or do you think you use them in your daily life? Not really, right? Let's look at some broader examples. What about these? Who would have known that this nature and logos in our daily life were made out of irrational numbers? I didn't know this, and when I found out, it fascinated me. That is why, for my research project, I decided to find out how much of irrational numbers existed in our surroundings and the benefits we can gain from understanding these numbers. The most commonly known irrational number is pi, or 3.14159, and it keeps on going on. Pi is a number found when you divide the circumference of a circle by its diameter. Anything that is a circle has pi, and pi exists in anything that is circular. So, like, pi exists in pi. But it also exists in car wheels, ornaments, round books, soccer balls, and cups, or any other things that are circular. Now, this is the most common irrational numbers, and now let's get into the interesting ones, the one that I really want to introduce to you guys. The first is the Euler's number, or also known as E. Specifically, 2.718281, and it keeps on going on. If you look at the graph, you see the line increasing suddenly with the slope getting steeper and steeper. And this number seems unrealistic to exist in our daily life. Yet, one famous example is in bank systems, or specifically, interest rates. Let's say we have a card with $1, and a bank system offers an annual interest rate of 100%. Then after a year, you will have $2. If the bank changes up its system and decides to provide 50% interest rate 2 times a year, you will have $2.25 by the end of the year. If the bank changes its system to 25% 4 times a year, then we will have $2.44 after a year. If the bank keeps on compounding to smaller and smaller percentage, to days, to hours, to minutes, to seconds, nanoseconds, we get E dollars. With the credit card with $1, the maximum amount of money that we can gain from interest rates is E dollars, or $2.718. Like, who would have known that? Another example is in lottery. We sometimes see on the television of someone won $1 billion in the lottery, someone won $1 million in the lottery. And you can wonder, what are the chances of winning a lottery? Let's say if there was 1 million possible chances in the lottery, then the person won with a 1 in a million chance. Yet, let's look at the same number in a different way. 1 in a million chance is the same thing as if the person plays the lottery every 1 million times, it is the same thing as 1 in an E chance of losing every single time, which is 36.8%. 36.8%. And this math is a little complicated, but to go over it right now. But trust me, it is 36.8%. In other words, you have a probability of 63.2% of winning the lottery every single time. Now, that's not a bad chance, right? But you got to remember, there are a million possible chances in the lottery. And once you realize this, your probability of winning the lottery is way below 1%. Another irrational numbers in our world is the golden ratio. The theory is this. If we have a rectangle with length A and width B, A divided by B equals A plus B over A, with a specific number of 1.618033. This impossible ratio does exist in our surroundings. If you look into architects, you can see in the Parthenon, the pediments, the height of the pillars, the base and height of the Parthenon makes up the proportion of the golden ratio. In the pyramid and the Great Sphinx, you can see the face of the Great Sphinx, the height of the Great Sphinx, and the proportion of the Great Sphinx to the pyramid equaling the golden ratio. If you look at the pyramid itself, the hypotenuse divided by the base of from the center to the edge is the golden ratio. If you look into famous artworks like the Mona Lisa, you can see the proportion of the eye, the nose, the face, and the body equaling the golden ratio. Also, in the Last Supper, you can see the tables, the windows, the walls, the disciples, and even where the location of Jesus equaling the golden ratio. The effect does not stop there. It even influences how we think today. If you ask a young adult what is one of their biggest concerns today, one of the first answers you could get is not being satisfied of how they look, not being pretty enough, not being handsome enough. But who created these beauty standards in our society? If you look, and I decide to find out what a professional person views the beauty standard, I decide to find out what a plastic surgeon considers the perfect face, or this. In the perfect face, you can see the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the length and height of the face are all proportionate to the golden ratio. In our world today, golden ratio exists everywhere. And with this understanding, you could ask, did the artists who painted the famous artwork know about the golden ratio before they painted it, and then somehow designed their artwork that the golden ratio fit? Or did the artist first create their art piece, and then the golden ratio somehow magically fit into their art piece? And is that why their artwork is so widely known? The answer is up to you to decide. But one thing is for sure, golden ratio is everywhere in our surroundings. You could ask, what is the benefits of understanding the irrational number? What effect does it have in our society? Well, I want to ask you guys, have you ever sat out on your balcony, looking out into the oceans, the mountains, and you felt calm? You felt soothing. One of the reasons of the calmness that you felt could be defined by the irrational numbers, or specifically, fractals. Fractals is a repeated pattern that keeps on reoccurring as we continue to zoom in on a point. And fractals has psychological benefits. According to a study by the Harvard Medical School, the electric signal profiles in our nervous systems follows fractals. And this is why the scientists hypothesize that we feel calm when we look into fractal images or paintings. The scientist says that Our mind has been built a natural inborn propensity to recognize and resonate with fractals. This might be why, when we look into fractal images or paintings, we recover from stress 60% better due to its soothing and calming effect. We can see irrational numbers in nature and even in our nervous systems, bringing psychological benefits. The benefits does not stop there. Irrational numbers also brings new innovations. We can see fractal images being placed into doctors' offices to calm the patients. We can see fractal painting being used as a new treatment for stress. We can see a new MRI scanner being developed with better function than ever before with the foundation of the golden ratio. And we can even see an increase in employment. In the solar panel plant station, there are more jobs being offered with the development of a new solar panel with a function that has been better than ever before. The effect of irrational number are phenomenal. And once I realized this, I wanted to share this information to others. I want to let the world know. That is why I decided to create a website. I had a homepage with eye-catching pictures to make sure the user doesn't leave as soon as they enter my website, which is something I sometimes do. I also had a different types page where I also had a history page where I talk about the history of how irrational numbers were invented, who invented these numbers, and how they came to be. I also had a different types page where I talk about the different types of irrational numbers in our world and the variety of places that we can find them. Lastly, I had a scavenger hunt page where I wanted to be more interactive. I listed some objects with irrational numbers that exist in our surroundings. Irrational numbers are all around us, and there are great benefits understanding these numbers. With the basic of the knowledge of irrational numbers, we can impact the world by finding a way to bring calmness, developing new innovations, improving our society, and even, maybe, winning a lottery. Do you guys remember the magic trick that I started with? Well, this is how it works. We all started with the number 1, and we added 7 moves, the number of moves that I told you to make. 1 plus 7 moves, and we arrive at an even number. The even number plus 2 times the number of your choice, we will land on an even number. And an even number plus 2 or 0, depending on your gender, we will land on an even number. And the only even numbers in the range of 1 to 5 are 2 and 4. Adding 2 to 2 equals 4, and adding 2 to 4 equals 4, because you bounce back. How is this beneficial? Well, you can be seen as a smart, amazing, mind-reading friend, child, or parent. Thank you.
There was once a kid. He was cheerful, bright, and outgoing. He loved it when he was around people. He had a positive attitude, and he loved helping others. But as he grew, he felt less accepted, and he grew more and more distant and discouraged. Through a series of events in his teenage years, he became more angry, more anxious, and he started hating himself. This initial emotion became concerned when he stopped going out. He stopped going to school and locked himself in his room, hoping for something to happen. What had happened to this kid? Depression. That was what the kid was going through. Mental illness is prevalent in our society today. The World Health Organization defines mental health as a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to her or his community. Poor mental health is an ever-growing issue in our society today that has to be mitigated as soon as possible. The WHO also underlines the importance of mitigating poor mental health because it is estimated to be one of the greatest burdens of diseases. Mental illnesses lead to other diseases because it takes a toll on your physical and emotional well-being and motivation. There are several factors that lead to mental illnesses. According to the National Liberty of Medicine, some of them are genes, family history, past experiences of stress or family abuse, chemical imbalances, brain injury, serious medical conditions, recreational drugs, loneliness, or isolation. Out of these, social relations are the leading factor of poor mental health, encompassing various emotional aspects. This social aspect of a person's health is the most significant yet modifiable factor. Although modern medicine has made advancements and is able to alter a person's brain chemistry, it is not enough. The treatment isn't complete. There is no saying that that person is not prone to that disease again. We are now in need of an efficient, long-lasting cure to this epidemic, and that is companionship. Companionship can decrease mental stress, improve physical and emotional well-being, and can work as a tool to help the mentally ill. Improving social relations through companionship will help a mentally ill person recover. In the context of mental health, companionship goes deeper than friendship. It provides us with a deeper sense of responsibility and connection. It is a bond that binds two people together. So, let's explore this concept. Companionship has 5 main characteristics. The first one is that companionship is voluntary. It can't be forced or compelled. You essentially get to choose who you want to be friends with. This freedom that comes with companionship is a core characteristic that gives an individual responsibility. Companionship is a personal relationship. A person's individual characteristic and their unique personality play a huge role while choosing friends. Sharing similar interests, commitment to a particular social cause, and individual characteristics play a huge role in companionships. Companionship is an emotional attachment. It is an effective bond. When two people are friends, the most significant dynamic that comes into play are emotions. You are, in a sense, emotionally obligated and attached to that person. Expressing emotions is what brings out vulnerability, and that leads to a healthier relationship. Companionship is a mutual relationship. We as humans are relational beings. We cannot survive without each other. Companionship in the word itself predisposes a relationship between two people. A one-sided companionship cannot exist. And lastly, companionship is an equal relationship. It aims to establish a relationship where two parties give equal effort, equal commitment, and equal input. This characteristic of companionship ties all of the characteristics mentioned above. In a relationship cannot and should not be mutual, effective, voluntary, and personal if it is not equally reciprocated. Good mental health lifts mood, increases self-love, avoids feeling of loneliness, and keeps us motivated. On the other hand, poor mental health is closely related to lower levels of self-confidence and low self-esteem. Mentally ill people have a hard time continuing friendships, and they disregard friends more than usual. But it is even more important for them to continue friendships. Having a friend increases self-confidence and builds self-love. A friend who is affirming and complimenting makes that person feel appreciated. A mentally ill person is lonely and he suffers from isolation. Companionship can help resolve that. Whether it is in person or virtual, friendships greatly influence our lives. Friends help us be motivated by keeping us in track. They act as a source of support when times are hard. With all the benefits that it brings, friendships are an investment worth making, especially for people suffering from mental illness. A 10-year-old Australian study found that older people with a large circle of friends were 22% less likely to die than those with fewer friends. In 2006, a study of 3,000 nurses with breast cancer found that women without close friends were 4 times as likely to die of the disease than those with 10 or more friends. This suggests a correlation between social circle and a person's health. A person is healthy mentally and physically if they have a healthy and large social network. But sadly and unsurprisingly, mental illness affects our social networks. People who suffer from severe forms of mental illness have smaller social circles, and they mostly comprise of family members rather than friends. People who have smaller social circles have fewer intimate relationships. And this makes it difficult for them to manage social situations. And in turn, they anticipate rejection from others because of the social negative stigma related to mental illness. A mentally ill person cannot open up. They aren't able to open up and reach out. So, we need to change. What can we do? This leads to our next question. How can we become better companions? According to the Mental Health Foundation, mental health problems are so misunderstood that someone who acknowledges your problem, continues to accept you, and treats you with compassion is doing something extremely important to aid your recovery. Approaching mentally ill people with the same attitude as you would approach someone else, being there to talk and listen to them, giving them practical help, and practicing acceptance and compassion is essential in every relationship. A few effective ways in which we can become better companions are: communicate honesty and genuine feelings. Stand by your words and promises. Be willing to trust your friends. Recognize each other's shortcomings. Practice value and empathy. And lastly, be present. Adopting all of these points into your relationships will help a mentally ill person recover and overcome their difficulties. People with poor mental health often require different things at different times, and friends can provide different things at different times too. So, what is something that we can do? Something that all of us can do, and the most important thing that all of us should do, is to be present. Be present. Talk to them and listen to anything they have to say. Take time to contact them and give them a visit. Help them out practically by doing their groceries or doing their household tasks, maybe clean their houses. The negative stigma associated with mental illness makes it hard for people to open up. So accept them, approach them with an open heart, and treat them equally. Let them know that you are there for them. In an attempt to contribute to this cause in our community, I set out to start an initiative for people to intentionally practice companionship. I met up with the leadership development class to discuss and talk about what our community really needs and what can we do as a class. But the truth is, companionship cannot be forced. It is not something that has a magical formula, but providing an opportunity for companionship to grow was possible. I also had a vision for our class to leave an impact in our community, so we came up with the Peer Mentoring Program. The Peer Mentoring Program is an initiative set to spark leadership, trust, accountability, and companionship amongst Dalat High School students. It primarily aims to build relationship among us. The leadership development class, along with other seniors, can individually mentor or partner up with other upperclassmen to mentor underclassmen. But unfortunately, due to the school locking down, we had to put that on hold. But as part of my project, I worked on it digitally for us to start it up again when things get better. My project comprises of a series of PowerPoints that explain the what, how, and why of peer mentoring. A person who wants to peer mentor can go into these presentations and essentially clearly see the what, hows, and whats of peer mentoring. I hope that this would spark companionship in our community and help people overcome the difficulties. In the beginning, I talked about a little kid. He was lonely, and he was suffering. And that little kid was me. I was suffering. I knew that there was something out there that could help me, something or someone. And that something and someone was a companion. But the tricky part to this problem is that often mental illnesses go unnoticed. It can be mistaken for someone's personality or even just ignored. But that motivates me more to try, and that should motivate you more to try and help change the world. Each and every one of you today has an opportunity to save someone's life. You do not have to spend heaps of money or even do something heroic or miraculous. You just have to reach out. Reach out. Ask a person how they're doing. Sit down with them and talk to them. Give them your time and listen to them. Believe me, you are doing so much more than you think you are. Together, we can make an impact on the world. Together, we can do this. Every person you see today is an opportunity to make a new companion. Thank you.
Who here would recognize a playground if they saw one? A playground set is pretty standard. It often has various raised platforms with many ways of climbing a board, like stairs and ladders. It often has much to do once you're there, like tunnels to crawl through and bridges to run across. It even has ways of getting down, like slides and fireman poles. Growing up, most of us really enjoyed the running, jumping, climbing, swinging, crawling that these playgrounds provided. They provided a place for us to be free, to explore, and to push our body to the limits. We learned to run faster, jump higher, climb quicker. Some of us even took these activities off the playground. We learned to climb trees, jump on our beds, or even play the classic childhood game, Floor is Lava. In all these activities, we explored a common thing, the way our bodies move and interact with the environment. Then came the tragedy of growing up. Our recesses were replaced with desks, our playtime replaced with homework, and our playgrounds replaced with social media. Now, none of these are bad, but the intrigue and excitement for movement in the environment was lost to these rites of passage. Some went on to specialize their movement by joining specific sports like basketball, baseball, football. Others preferred their devices or books and dropped off the grid of physical activity. But some, a small, growing number, opted instead to never leave those playgrounds behind them. No, they found ways to turn the world around them into a playground. This park bench, playground. This wall, playground. This table, playground. In their eyes, movement never stops. There is no limit to what we're capable of, and there is no ceiling to our accomplishment. These people who never grew out of running, jumping, climbing, swinging, crawling, we call them tracers. And these tracers have trained their ability to move and interact with the environment to the point of accomplishing feats previously thought to be impossible, and making reasonable feats that were previously thought to be dangerously unwise. These tracers who never stop moving, they call it parkour. Parkour is about learning how to move and interact with your environment in the most quick and efficient way. These tracers will learn anything from scaling buildings to climbing walls to jumping over anything in their way so that no obstacle will ever be unconquerable for them. They turn the world around them into their own personal playground or obstacle course, finding places to challenge their skills and techniques in locations such as sidewalks, playgrounds, parks, universities, and so on. And as they explore the way their body moves and interact with the environments, they also get the added benefit of exploring the natural and urban settings around their home, coming to know the places they live much better. So, about 25 years ago, parkour was first kicking off as an urban sport. And the first group to ever train parkour was this group called the Yamakasi, and it consisted of young men from France. Two of these young men were David Bell, the credited founder of parkour, and Sebastian Foucan, his close friend. Now, as this group trained together, Bell and Foucan began to differ on their opinions of where the sport should go in the future. Bell preferred the practical, efficient, humble, hardworking discipline of parkour, whereas Foucan saw potential for a more expressive, artistic, stylistic sport of parkour. As the two continued to train together with this group, they eventually could not handle the disagreement and split off from the group, resulting in a continuation of the sport, of the discipline of parkour. But while that discipline continued to live on, Foucan added elements of style from various other disciplines such as breakdancing or capoeira, and that resulted in a new sport titled freerunning. Now for me, I started parkour about 3.5 years ago. I was surfing YouTube, like most teenagers do, and I came across this channel called Ronnie Street Stunts. And this guy was doing flips and tricks like I had never seen before, and I did not see them even possible. But there he was, right in front of my eyes. Now, I didn't think to do any of what he was doing. I knew he was a pro, and I knew I was so far out from being able to perform those tricks. So I just left it as it was. But a few days later, I came back to his channel, and I found a full list of hundreds of tutorials, videos detailing how to perform and learn these tricks that he was performing in his videos in a safe and controlled manner. So I took to this list of tutorials, and I found the two safest, most low-risk techniques I could possibly find. the safety roll, and the safety vault. Do you see the theme? As I practiced these tricks and I mastered them, I could not get enough of exploring the way our bodies move, of interacting with the environment in ways I never had before. I didn't view tables the same way that I did before. I didn't view the ground the same way as I did before. I didn't view falling the same way as I did before. And I had only gotten a taste of what parkour was. So after I learned those two tricks, I went straight back to Ronnie Street Stunts, and I learned as many tricks as I could possibly find. Now, just about everyone who starts doing parkour faces the same stumbling block: fear. Fear is a beast who can come upon you at the worst moments, right as you're about to try something new, and tell you it's not worth it. But if you can push fear back just enough to go for it, fear often comes around for round two. He tells you to give up, to fail, to stop right in the middle of what you're doing. Sadly, fear can be one of the biggest deterrents to parkour. Now, us tracers were well aware of that, and we all approach it in very different ways. Some of us try to push through the fear. They ignore the fear and they go for it anyways. While others instead try to eradicate the fear on the front end by doing a variety of techniques, including just practicing. But I stand somewhere in the middle. Fear, yes, can stop you from doing amazing and new and incredible things, but it can also stop you from doing stupid and dumb things. Fear greatly decreases the rate and risk of injury in parkour, but it can also stop you from trying amazing stuff. So I don't think parkour is a sport of overcoming or eradicating your fear. No, parkour is a sport of taking control of your fear, taking the reins and making that jump. So I was walking home from school one day, and I'm walking down the sidewalk, and I saw these handrails on the side of the sidewalk. And the first thing that came to mind was that this spot was gold. Now, most people would not think twice about this spot. They drive by without giving it a thought. But when I saw this spot, I saw a part to jump up, a part to jump down, and a part to jump across, and a whole lot of handrails to train my various techniques on. And the more I looked at this spot, the more I decided there were so many different challenges I could accomplish here. So I got excited, I started thinking, I started stretching, and I started training. And as I'm jumping around in this ditch with these handrails, my friend walked up. So we sat and we talked for a bit. And when the conversation started to die, he looked at my spot and he asked, "What if you jumped from there on the handrail to the wall?" Now, I thought this was kind of ridiculous. I mean, I had made jumps that big before, so the size of the jump was not what was concerning to me. What concerned me was the 8-foot fall if I messed up, the very small lip on the wall that I was meant to land on, and the fact that I was jumping from a handrail, which could be slippery and is not a technique I had practiced very much. So we talked about it a bit more, and eventually he decided it was not smart. He receded his challenge and walked away. But as he was walking away, I looked at the spot a little more, and I thought, what if I could accomplish that challenge? What would I do to get there? So I took to the sidewalk right next to the gap, and I jumped the same distance just on the sidewalk. No lip of the wall, no 8-foot gap, no handrail, just ground to ground. And I did that over and over and over and over until I was very comfortable with it. And then I jumped from the handrail down to the sidewalk. So it was the same gap, or the same distance, but I was jumping from a handrail, practicing that technique. And I did it over and over until I was comfortable. And finally, I jumped from the handrail to the wall, but without the gap. At this point, I knew for a fact that I could land it. I had done an identical jump, it just didn't have the same risk. So, I stepped up on that handrail, and right as I was leaning in for the jump, I stepped off that handrail. What happened? I knew I could do it, and I could do it. But one thing still stood in my way, and that was fear. I was scared of falling into that 8-foot ditch. I was scared of getting hurt. But I realized at that point that I could let that fear do two things to me. I could let that fear force me to give up. Or I could let that fear motivate me to land the trick, remind me why this is so important to me. So I stood up on that handrail, and I looked at where I was going to land, and I jumped. And my feet landed not well, but successfully on the wall on the other end. I had completed the challenge. I took the reins, and I made the jump. Fear should not deter people from parkour. In fact, training parkour instills basic habits of interacting with fear in a safe and controlled manner and gives you a better understanding of fear that you can apply in both your training and in your daily life. The two basic safety concepts that I often refer to in my training are progression and repetition. Sebastian Foucan, the founder of free running that I mentioned earlier, said, repetition, repetition, repetition. By this, he meant that no one lands a trick in their first try. And if they do, they haven't practiced enough to be able to land it every single try. Repetition is how tracers come to better understand the techniques they're learning and remember the techniques they're learning and find the flaws in the techniques they're learning so that they can improve. The second concept is progression. Progression is a matter of taking the end goal, that final challenge, the jump from the handrail to the wall, and breaking it up into small, achievable steps. In fact, the most common way of getting hurt in parkour is to see an advanced technique, assume you can do it, and then just go for it. With no repetition, no progression, no proper instruction, no guidance. That is the most common way of getting hurt in parkour. If you think about it, you can actually see both of these principles in my story of trying to land that jump. I found the small steps of jumping from sidewalk to sidewalk, handrail to sidewalk, and so on, and I practiced them over and over and over until I was comfortable with them. So for the past few weeks, I've been working on a project. And this project was to write 6 workshop-style curricula in written form. And the goal was to explain basic parkour concepts in a way that anyone can understand, but also in a way that would be useful for someone who knows parkour to teach others. I took all 6 workshop curricula and I compiled them on a website called PK Workshops, which can be found at pkworkshops.wordpress.com. My hope for this website is that anyone can take a look at it, read the descriptions, and use it in tandem with video tutorials so that they can fully understand these basic concepts as they learn parkour. Parkour is not some video reel of insane flips, tricks, jumps from buildings that you can't do. You can do parkour. It's just a matter of figuring out why you want to. Do you want to work out in a way that is more exciting than lifting weights? Do you want a community that can push you forward and encourage you? Or do you just want to try something new? I train parkour because I love to interact with the way that God created our bodies to move and interact with the environment. I love to explore it and discover and push my limits as far as they can go. Like I said, parkour is not something you can't do. In fact, it's literally moving more efficiently than you do now. You could count skipping stairs on a staircase as parkour. Parkour is a world of movement and community. Whether you're looking for a workout, looking for something new, or just looking for some friends, parkour can tailor perfectly to all of these desires. Do not let fear stop you. If I would challenge you with anything, it would be to take the reins and to make that jump. Thank you.